Texas is back with a huge win over Alabama. Alabama falls out of the top five. And where is Colorado after their huge win over Nebraska? All this and more here on the College Football Fanatics podcast. I'll see you after this. So we have had week 2 of the college football season, and there were some really exciting games that were played here in week 2. We saw Texas and Alabama play, and that was a great game. It got a little more. It got better. It was a great game that just kept getting better, in my opinion. The score makes it look like Texas was more in control of that game than they actually were. But A.D. Mitchell and Quinn Ewers over in Texas they connected really well in that game. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the Illinois-Kansas game because that was a lot of fun to watch. We'll talk about Colorado-Nebraska. We'll also talk about a couple of things that I want to talk about in regards to the rankings. So let's really get into it. So let's start with the Illinois-Kansas game. Jalen Daniels, the Kansas quarterback, looked really good. I thought he looked accurate. He made good decisions. And he escaped the pocket when he knew he had to. On the flip side, with Illinois' quarterback, Luke Altmaier, he looked skittish, in my opinion. He looked somewhat indecisive, and he really struggled against this Kansas team. And it really showed on the field that he just, in my opinion, did not have the confidence that a quarterback in charge of a Division I football team needs to have in order to win games. And that was a strong reason as to why they didn't win that game. But it wasn't all Luke Altmaier's fault. Kansas had great awareness plays where they just looked phenomenal. I mean, it was just like they were just on top of it at every step of the way. It's what led Kansas to their 34-23 victory over Illinois. And then there was also a few times where I was looking at the penalties that both sides were getting, but primarily it was hurting Illinois more than it was hurting Kansas. And that was a really strong point of emphasis that I wanted to make, was that Kansas was just being a very undisciplined not Kansas. Illinois was being a very undisciplined team athletically. They couldn't get too much going. Luke Altmaier threw 28 passes with only 19 completions for 202 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. For a quarterback that is leading a Big Ten team that was rather good last year, that's not the numbers you want your quarterback putting out. It really isn't. Those 2 interceptions were just good defensive plays by Kansas. And the Kansas defense also looked like they didn't have leadership on that field. They really, in my opinion, felt the loss of Devin Witherspoon more than anything else. In my opinion, he showed a good amount of leadership to lead that defense. And since they've lost him, they have not looked nearly the same, especially in the secondary position. So that's to be expected. He was a great corner. So it's not necessarily unexpected that they would suffer in that position. Jalen Daniels, not to be confused with Jaden Daniels, through 29 attempts for 21 completions. He had 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's the stat line you want to have with the quarterback. It's a very similar stat line to what J.J. McCarthy over at Michigan had playing against UNLV, as well as what he had last week playing against ECU. So it really is something you want to have. Now, the 1 interception isn't great, but it's not a game. It wasn't a great game record for Kansas. They didn't feel that loss in the way that Luke Altmaier felt. Luke Altmaier in Illinois felt those 2 interceptions more keenly. Isaiah Williams was the Illinois leading receiver with 6 receptions for 99 yards and a long of 29. So there really isn't much more to talk about. It's just, I think in my opinion, Illinois is not going to be vying for a Big Ten, for a Big Ten championship at all. I think there are multiple teams ahead of them. In particular, I think Wisconsin is ahead of them. Possibly Minnesota. I'm not sure yet. I have to go back and watch their games, but it is one of those things where I'm like, you can tell in the first few weeks that this team just isn't it. They're either not getting coordinated well enough, or they're not playing to the amount of talent they have on our team, or anything like that. So like I said, I don't think this is a team that is going to be vying for a Big Ten championship this year. Next up is going to be Nebraska versus Colorado. Nebraska struggled to get things going on the ground. They eventually, I don't even want to say they eventually did get things going on the ground, because they really didn't. They eventually just did well enough to hold back Colorado's talent pool until about the middle of the third quarter. That's when Colorado's talent really overtook Nebraska and started to give Nebraska a pretty bad day. Shedeur Sanders had another phenomenal game. He really couldn't have done too much better if you had asked him to. He threw 31 completions for 42 attempts, 393 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's just a great game. That is another Heisman worthy performance. It's just building on what he had last week. And he's now, I think, in the 900 yard range, I believe, right now. So yeah, it's about 400 yards this week, 510 last week. So it really is quite a big deal. Jeff Sims needs to hold on to the football. I saw at least 3 fumbled snaps, and there could have been more, but I saw at least 3 fumbled snaps, and that killed them. Those fumbled snaps were at crucial times in the game when they needed to get things going, and those fumbled snaps just absolutely killed it. Now, that's not entirely to be blamed on Jeff Sims, although there is a lot of blame to go on him. There was a snap, I can't remember what quarter it was, but I think it was like a tight end was running across to get into position. He was in motion, and the center snaps the ball, and it hits the tight end in the hip. As a center, they should be somewhat aware of when, players are going into motion, but that still does lie on the quarterback to call it correctly. Now, I don't know if that was miscommunication between Jeff Sims and his center. I don't know what that was. All I know is that he had several fumbled snaps that at least two of them were not the center's fault in any way, shape, or form. They just weren't. It was just Jeff Sims either not paying attention or just bungling a big moment in the game. Another problem that I had was that Colorado's Travis Hunter is just a monster. He is the best non-quarterback player in college football, and he may be the best player in college football. It's really hard to try and argue against that statement. I mean, if you just look at things, sorry, I'm pulling up my notes here. If you just look at things, you can see that Hunter had 3 receptions for 73 yards with a 40-yard long. And then he also had 4 solo tackles. Now, he didn't have any sacks in this game or tackles for loss. And he didn't have an interception. It was Silman Craig who had the interception. But he showed great awareness on the defensive side of the ball, and on the offensive side of the ball, I think I said this last week, he showed great body control. He was just getting things, and he also showed really good speed as well. That 40-yard long was a phenomenal catch. So, next up is Colorado had an undisciplined start. And what I mean by that, and what I mean when I say, teams are undisciplined or things like that, is that it's that they had some troubles with penalties, whether it was a false start or whatever it was, holding, something like that. Yes, they had an undisciplined start, but they pulled off the win, and Colorado officially has more wins under Deion Sanders than Colorado had in the entirety of last year. Through 2 games, they have more wins than Colorado had the entirety of last year. It is sad when you see a team who's only played 2 games and has more wins than their entire team did the previous year. But that chalks up to the amount of talent and how Deion Sanders has shaped his roster. Now, some people are like, this team could go, win a win a Pac-12 championship. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to contend in the same arena that Washington is, or USC, or even I shouldn't say. I think they have a chance to beat Oregon. I still view Oregon as the favorite. But schools like Washington, USC, maybe even Oregon State, Utah, I believe all of those teams are better than Colorado. I believe they have more talent on their roster, and I think that that talent is more widely distributed among their roster. But with Deion Sanders, anything's possible. Now, I tend to cap this team at about 7 wins. Earlier, I believe I said I think like 6 wins is probably realistic for them. I would say 7 or 8 wins is probably more realistic now. But I do want to wait until Colorado plays a team that is that gives them more of a challenge. So we'll wait a few weeks to see them do that. Next up is going to be UNLV, Michigan versus UNLV. Jay Harbaugh coached the first half, and Mike Hart coached the second in this game because Jim Harbaugh is still out because of that self-imposed suspension. JJ McCarthy just looked phenomenal. I think he has like an 87.5% completion percentage in the last 2 games, which I believe is the highest among Power 5 quarterbacks. So he looked very comfortable out in the pocket. He moved up when he had to. He used his legs a little bit, and it was just kind of like, a reminder to UNLV, like, yeah, you can guard, Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards or Roman Wilson, who JJ has been favoring this year. But you also got to be aware that, I can use my legs too. And he really proved that to them. The defensive line looked improved upon last week. They got more pressure onto the quarterback. They got a few sacks, a few tackles for loss. So it really was a great a great performance overall by Michigan. Roman Wilson has been JJ's most reliable and consistent target. I also want to bring up this stat. JJ McCarthy has as many 20-plus yard completions as he does incompletions. So overall incompletions and 20-plus yard completions are the same. He has 6 20-plus yard completions and 6 incompletions this season. So it really is a great it really is a great season so far for JJ. We'll see if he can continue to output this style of performance. And I also want to say something else. There was a moment later in the game, I think it was like fourth quarter. Jack Tuttle was running out of bounds, and one of the UNLV players hit him and sort of like, hurt him a little bit. And he had to go off to the side and things like that. But it's not the player that hit him that I want to point out in this case. It's actually the UNLV coach. The UNLV coach did something that I haven't seen a lot of coaches do. And that was he showed an immense amount of admirable sportsmanship, that when Jack Tuttle was coming off and he was going back to his sideline, you could see that the UNLV coach actually went over, shook his hand, and I think he apologized. I'm not entirely sure because you don't get the sound of that, but I do think he apologized. But he showed a lot of sportsmanship, and it was nice to see a coach kind of go, my player was in the wrong for this. I apologize. Let me do what I can. So I wanted to highlight that because that is a really big thing that I tend to find a lot of football players and coaches and things like that could use more of. Football is obviously a very violent game. It tends to bring out a lot of emotions, and that's totally understandable. But allowing yourself to put your ego aside for a minute and say, admit that your player was in the wrong, or admit, or say, or just, go up there and be like, hey, sorry about that. I hope you're feeling better. It's a really great thing. And I really applaud the UNLV head coach for that. So I'm going to give him a round of applause. There we go. So that's my round. That's my round of applause. Texas A&M isn't it this year. They really have fumbled the ball on the amount of talent that they have brought in. Now, granted, a lot of their talent has gone elsewhere. They have transferred out of Texas A&M, but they still continue to have really good recruiting classes. Miami, in my opinion, Miami just looked like the better team. Based on the eye test, there was not much you could do. And I think it was like second or third quarter, Miami had a phenomenal kick return touchdown that was like 98 yards. And it was a lot of fun to watch them do that. It was so unexpected when I turned on my TV and saw that. There was a point where Weigman, Texas A&M's quarterback, threw an interception. And I want to make the statement that it wasn't his fault. Um, I'm trying to remember exactly what happened, but I think he was like either hit or oh no, I remember what it was now. One of his players accidentally slid on the grass and lost his footing. If he hadn't slid, the pass would have been a perfectly thrown pass to his receiver. Unfortunately, because his player did, it was a perfectly thrown pass to the other team. That wasn't his fault. You can't blame the quarterback for a perfectly thrown ball to a receiver who slipped. It's just you can't blame him for that. So in this game, let me pull up the box score. Wegman had 53 attempts for 31 completions, 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And then Van Dyke had 30 attempts for 21 completions, for 374 yards and 5 touchdowns. That was really good. That was phenomenal. You can't ask much more out of Tyler Van Dyke than you saw out of this game. It's just almost 400 yards passing with 30 attempts was, whew, man. This could be a scary Miami team. Now, I don't want to say that I was right because I don't think I ever actually explicitly said on this podcast that I thought Texas A&M was going to go 4-0, 4-8 again. But Texas A&M isn't it. People have asked, is this finally the year for Texas A&M to improve upon their recent records? No, not even close. It's not. And it's not going to be. I don't think that there really is much that can be done to make this team in terms of skill better. I think it mostly comes down to coaching, but who knows? And then the next game I want to highlight is actually going to be the Indiana State game. Now this was a game that neither Indiana nor Indiana State, which Indiana State is a D1 2A school. So they're in kind of like the same area as I'm trying to think what schools. God, I can't remember, but they're not in the normal Division 1 areas. So Indiana obviously is in the Big Ten. Indiana State, it's in like the Valley Conference or something like that. I can actually pull it up, but Indiana State looked, or Indiana, sorry, I should say, Indiana's defensive line looked pretty good against Indiana State, but I would expect that out of a true Division 1 school. Against a school like Indiana State, that they really should dominate. Indiana State just completely out of the there shouldn't even be a question as to whether or not Indiana State is a team that could even provide any challenge. They can't. Jalen Lucas, the running back for Indiana, I was watching him because I wanted to see what he could do. And what I saw surprised me. He has great speed and great vision. And when you allow him to go to the outside, he'll beat you with his legs all day. And he excels there. He really does. He made Indiana State players look like they were almost standing still. He also has a very good change of direction. Agility. So it was really fun to see that. Indiana also, I do want to point this out, is another team that had some penalty issues. They had like unnecessary penalties that really didn't have to be there. And then there was a little bit of a quarterback controversy, and Taven Jackson is now the starting quarterback for Indiana. He is a dual threat quarterback, but I fear that he may suffer from what a lot of dual threat quarterbacks suffer from, and that is suffering accuracy in the passing game. And what I mean by that is a lot of dual threat quarterbacks are phenomenal with their feet. That's why they're a dual threat quarterback. But their accuracy percentages, their completion percentages, even on easy throws, tend to be lower than those pocket passer type quarterbacks. And I really hope he isn't like that, but there's a strong chance that he is. But he still had a thoroughly dominant game against Indiana State, where they beat Indiana State 41-7. He had 21 attempts for 18 completions, which is a good accuracy complete percentage. Sorry, I fumbled over my words. Good accuracy percentage right there. But he had 236 yards. But I did see him miss a couple of easy throws that he shouldn't have missed. But in my opinion, he still looked phenomenal out there. And he's a player that I think a lot of schools in the Big Ten are going to have to watch. They're going to have to look at him and go, okay, we're going to have to plan our game plan around this kid, because it's hard to defend against dual threat quarterbacks, and very few teams are good at it. Very few teams. Even Nick Saban struggled with it for quite a few years. Now, he was never bad at it necessarily, but he did struggle at times. He struggled. When his teams played like Johnny Manziel's Texas A&M team, they struggled containing Johnny Manziel. Even when they would game plan their entire thing around him, they struggled. So it's not going to be an easy road for teams facing Indiana. So I'll be interested to see what they can do throughout the rest of the year. And then the last game I want to talk about was one of the most interesting games of the season, and it was very clearly a game that has a lot of meaning, both to the fan bases as well as to those of us who want to see college football look slightly different than it has the past 10 years, past 10, 15 years. And that was Texas's win over Alabama with a margin of 34 to 24. And this was a phenomenal game because it kind of looked like part 2 of last year's game, but even better. It was phenomenal, and I can't wait to see what this Texas team can do, because Texas, and I will say it this time, because earlier in the polls I was like, I don't want to overhype a team. Texas is back. They beat a skilled Alabama team. Now, they have a chance, and I think the chance is good, of winning the Big 12. Now, the team that they're going to have to look out for are going to be Oklahoma and Kansas State. Kansas State is the defending title winners, but I still think that Texas has a very good shot of winning the title. Oklahoma, on the other hand, also has a good chance of winning the title. They've scored a lot of points this season, and I'm not surprised. They're a very good offensive team, and they're a solid defensive team as well. So it'll be interesting to see. What happens. Is this the downfall of Nick Saban's dynasty at Alabama? And I struggle to say yes to this, because Nick Saban, and I've said it before, Nick Saban is too good of a coach to be blatantly dismissed. He brings in too good of players, and he utilizes his players too well. Now, I don't think Jalen Milroe is the messiah of quarterbacks, basically, at Ohio State. Or not Ohio State, Alabama. He had a okay game. He was 27 for 14, about half, a little over half, for 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions really did kill Jalen Milroe. I mean, it was a hard road for him with those 2 interceptions. On the other hand, Quinn Ewers had 38 attempts for 24 completions, with 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, and A.D. Mitchell did A.D. Mitchell and Jatavion Sanders really proved to be the cream of the crop, along with, I would argue, Xavier Worthy. They really proved to be the cream of the crop for this Texas receiving core. Jatavion Sanders had 5 receptions for 114 yards, 0 touchdowns. A.D. Mitchell, Adonai is that his first name, Adonai, but he's known as A.D. A.D. Mitchell had 3 receptions for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Xavier Worthy had 5 receptions for 75 yards and 1 touchdown. It was really nice to see those guys kind of really get things going in the air. And it was nice to see that Quinn Ewers has grown up. He has lost the mullet look. He has left the 80s behind and has decided to finally step into the 2023 era and grow up as a human being. We did not see any Arch Manning in this game, but I'm sure we will throughout the rest of the season. But it was really fun to see. It was really fun to see Texas finally overcome their hump of Alabama, and it was nice to see Alabama lose. Now, I am not a person who hates Alabama. Michigan has played Alabama a couple of times, but only once that I can truly remember, and that was in Dallas in like 2016 or something like that, or it was like it was a while ago. And Alabama thoroughly dominated that Michigan team. I can't remember what year it was, but it was a while ago, and Alabama completely just demolished our team. I think it was actually the end of the Brady Hoke era. It might have been like 2013 or something like that. But it was a significant loss. But I do like to see teams that have been doing well for a long time fall. I do like to see those teams fall, with the exception of my Wolverines. That's the only team I never want to see lose again. So let's go into the rankings. Georgia is still obviously number 1 with 55 votes for the first place team. Michigan is number 2 still with 2 votes for the first place. Florida State is now number 3 after rising from number 5. They have 3 first place votes. Texas is number 4, rising 6 spots. And they have 2 first place votes. USC rising 1 spot at number 5. Ohio State is actually dropped 2 spots. They were at number 4. Now they're at number 6. I struggle with saying that it's okay to drop teams, even when they win, because you shouldn't punish a team for winning. And they beat Youngstown State. Now, did they do it in the fashion that some of us would have liked? No, but they still did beat Youngstown State. Now, does Kyle McCord look like the quarterback messiah of Ohio State? No. and he's not. He's not going to be. But he's a solid quarterback for them. Penn State stayed at number 7. Number 8 is Washington, also staying at number 8. Notre Dame was raised 2 spots to go up to number 9 from number 11. Alabama dropped 7 spots because of their loss to Texas. At number 10, number 11 is Tennessee, also dropping 2 spots. Utah staying at number 12, Oregon staying at number 13, LSU staying at 14. Kansas State staying at 15. Oregon State was raised 2 spots, going to 16. Ole Miss was raised 3 spots, going to 17. Colorado was raised 7 spots, going to 18. Oklahoma was dropped 2 spots, going to 19. North Carolina dropped 4 spots, going to 20. Duke was raised 3 spots, going to 21. Miami went from being unranked to being number 22. Washington State also went from being unranked to going to 23. UCLA went from going unranked to going to number 24. And Iowa, also unranked, went to 25. Teams that dropped from the rankings was Wisconsin, who dropped from 19. Clemson dropped from 21. Tulane from 22. And Texas A&M dropped from 23. So the biggest winners of this week, this past weekend of college football, I'm going to say it's Miami, number 1. They went from being unranked to going into number 22. Then it's going to be Colorado getting raised 7 spots. And after them, it's going to be Texas getting raised 6 spots after their win over Alabama. Those are the big, the big teams that that really won. The biggest losers of this year, obviously, is going to be Alabama. It's going to be North Carolina, and it's also going to be Wisconsin, Clemson, Tulane, and Texas A&M. All 4 of those teams because they dropped out of the top 25. North Carolina because they dropped 4 spots, and Alabama because they dropped 7. So that is, that's the rankings for this year. I'm not really a ranking commentator or I don't do rankings on this show because I tend to find them somewhat irrelevant until you get to like week 6. Because we've seen teams with 1 loss get in, and we've seen teams with 2 losses nearly get in. And I could see a possible future where teams with 2 losses get into the college football playoffs. So, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. You can find us over on Instagram. You can find us over on Instagram under CF_fanatics_official. It's below my talking head if you need that read out, if you need that spelled out. You can also find us under the College Football Fanatics podcast in Spotify. And you can also find us here again on YouTube. I'll be releasing an episode this Wednesday and also this Friday. Wednesday, we'll be talking about some of the Mel Tucker drama, as well as there's a little Baylor drama that was quite fun to listen to. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have any comments, please leave them down below in the description below, down in the comment section below. Sorry. Also, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out. It really helps me grow. And I hope you guys come back for Wednesday's episode. See you guys in the next episode.